All right, let's jump into this so I can finish this one course and dive into the book of Job next week. So we're in our last session of Corey Coffee and Conspiracy for the moment. I'll pick something up during the summertime when we're trying to lure you out when it's nice weather. So bottom line is, you know the verse, 2 Corinthians 4:4. You know the whole deal by now. If you don't, well then I don't know what to tell you. All right, so we're in Holy Grail. This is episode number 4. It's called the Bloodlines, okay? The bloodline families. And tonight we're going to deal with one specific one and show you how that all of them are connected. And I'm going to show you who really runs this country. And it ain't Washington, D.C. Matter of fact, the people running this country are not even in this country. And that kind of stinks as us as Americans thinking we're running the show. We're not running anything. And it's because they are in control of the financial system. And at the end of the day, whoever runs the money runs the world. I don't care who makes the law, that person who runs the money controls it all. Okay? And so what we're going to do is talk about that. Obviously, the bloodline families that we've talked about, 13 specific ones. Now, guys, you got to understand, you can't just follow 13 names all the way down the line, because between intermarriages and women having the bloodline, and then a person marries in, they take that name and so forth. And so like the Merovingians, you're not going to find a lot of those today, but you will find the Pacers and those people. And that's the one I told you that I think the Antichrist will come through. But the most famous one to us is either the Rockefellers or the Rothschilds. Those are the two most famous for us. However, if you go down this list, you can find all these. The Astors, the Bundys, the Collins, the DuPonts, the Freemans, and so forth. And so last week we dove into this and said, if you want to understand how they control it all, you have to understand secret societies, because that's how they control everything. And that's how they get their tentacles in everything that's moving. Okay, through secret societies. And that's still going on today. And it started all the way back with the Templars. And I'm not going through a review on all this, because I'm going to try to knock a lot of information out tonight. So the Templars were the first real major secret society, and what they ended up becoming is a vast conglomerate of wealth, to the point that they were loaning money to kings and noble families and whole government systems, if you will, back in the feudal system. And so eventually, one of the kings grabbed some money from him. He lost the war because they were funding his war. He realizes, oh no, I'm in trouble. I can't pay back this loan. And so to help him out, the Pope at that time, they decide to call out the Templars for all kinds of blasphemy, and they burned them. Friday the 13th, 1307. When that happens, the Templars that weren't burnt slipped off, ended up over in Scotland, which is the start of what we know as modern Freemasonry. Okay? And the Freemasons, as they extended their arms throughout all of Europe and into the New World, there was a lodge going up in every town. And through that lodges, they were reaching out into societies and controlling governments from ground level all the way up. Okay? Now, this whole thing of Freemasonry is the avenue in which, number 3, the Illuminati is going to start out. So Weishaupt, who starts the Illuminati in 1776, he at the moment is not a Freemasonry person, but he realizes that if he's ever going to spread his stuff, he has to work through that, and that's how they work it. And the Illuminati is obsessed with symbolism and ritualism. All right. Then we have the Rosicrucians, started in 1188, and they, man, I won't go through all their deal, but they're a secret society that's all about knowledge. Okay. Then we have the black nobility. This goes through Prince Charles and so forth, and black nobility comes back and says, hey, we're descendants of King David. We have a right to the land and to the throne. Which land? Okay, now you'll start to understand the Balfour Declaration, which was addressed to who? Lord Rothschild, but that's a whole side note. Okay, Then we have the round tables, okay? In the round tables that got started, we now have the modern versions of that. That's the Bilderbergs, the Council on Foreign Relations, known as the CFR, started by Jacob Schiff, which we will talk about tonight. All right? And then we had the Trilateral Commission that was made in the 70s by David Rockefeller, Jimmy Carter, and Brzezinski. Now, then we got into the Fabian Society. And so far, guys, I'm still in review for last week. The Fabian Society was founded in 1884. The Fabian Society had been plotting world government tyranny for 137 years. George Orwell came out of this. He's the one that wrote the whole book, 1984. It was written in 1939. But if you read 1984, that was written in 1939, you actually see 2022. Or 2020, if really, but go on. All right. Their logo is a wolf in sheep's clothing. They were white supremacists, they were the originators of the party, the Labour Party in Great Britain. Their belief system was National Socialism. They started the School of London Economics. It was funded by the Rothschilds. And at that school, and it's still there today, believed in National Socialism. What do you think they're teaching today? Now, let me remind you, what we fought against in World War II was National Socialism being procreated by a man named Adolf Hitler. Now, they're all buying into the same system now. Here are their key doctrines, and see if you can see anything that might hit your, daily life today. Social justice, eugenics, we call it transhumanism now. Abortion, universal health care, National Socialism funded by capitalism. You're living in that, by the way. You're trying to have a socialist society funded by capitalism. Now, all land should be owned by the state and only rented by the people. The ends justify the means. Whatever he just said in the last class was the opposite of that. It's never a good thing to do a bad thing to accomplish a good thing. Not to them. Whatever the outcome is, get there by any means. All right, then we got into the Rhodes Society. In 1870, John Ruskin, an English professor, taught his apprentices that some of the people are superior to others and that one superior man should rule the world. He's going to get his wish, by the way. He's called the Antichrist. But the Rhodes Society believed that there were certain people more superior to others. Cecil Rhodes, who was an absolute disciple of John Ruskin, kept his speeches as written out forms in his pockets. Cecil Rhodes, who was involved in the De Beers Company in going out and fleecing Africa for the diamonds and the gold, by the way, funded by the Rothschilds. He ends up starting what's known as the Rhodes Scholarship. And the Rhodes Society was all about one world government and pushing that whole deal. Cecil Rhodes proposed the idea of the British Empire to re-annex the United States of America and reform it as a imperial federation to the establishment, a superpower and lasting world peace. All right, by the way, so the United States being annexed back in. Well, technically that hasn't happened. Monetarily, it did a long time ago. Matter of fact, around early 1900s. Now, so in 1877, at the age of 23, he wrote his first will and he expressed his wishes to create a secret society known as the Society of the Elect, right? That would strive this goal, which is where we get in his last one, he starts what's called the Rhodes Scholarship. And a Rhodes Scholar is a big deal now. And all these secret societies, what they're really good at is finding very talented people, whether it's in one of the sciences, getting that individual, pumping money into them, and then adapting them to think the way they want to. And then you have brilliant people, i.e. Bill Clinton. Whether you like Bill or whether you don't, he is a brilliant individual. Okay? Same thing with Barack Obama and so forth. Now, the village idiot we got now can't complete a sentence, so do what you want with him. But whether you like these guys or not, for the most part, by the way, George W. wasn't a very bright individual either. He couldn't complete a sentence either. But now, when you look at these guys, they're brilliant individuals. They're not stupid. by any sense of the word. But they've been taken and shapen by these secret societies, by these people like the Rhodes Society. Here are some Rhodes scholars: Bill Clinton, Cory A. Booker, George Stephanopoulos, Dean Rusk, who was the Secretary of State during the Vietnam War. And you run around and you go, why are these people buying into this socialism? Well, because they've been brainwashed all the way back to their college days to buy into it. And so now they're pumping it into society today. Now, here's where we picked up, okay, or going to pick up, because this is where we left off last week. Another one is called the Jesuits. The Jesuits, for the lack of a better term, is the Catholicism mafia. They are running the show, whether you realize it or not. Now watch this, okay? It was founded by Ignatius of Loyola and 6 companions with the approval of Pope Paul III in 1540. The head of the Jesuits is known as the Black Pope. Most people didn't even know you had a Black Pope. The main Pope over in Rome is considered the White Pope. And so the Black Pope is the head of the Jesuits. The current White Pope in Rome today is actually the first ever Jesuit Pope, which is a big deal, guys, okay? Now, I don't have time to go into, our goal here isn't to give you every information of each one of these. We're giving you an overview, all right? Now, the current Jesuits work in education, research, and cultural pursuit. Now, what's funny is the research part. Do you know who the head of CERN is in Switzerland? He's a Jesuit. Now, why are the religious Jesuits the head of a CERN project with the Super Hadron Collider, trying to find the God particle? Okay? Now, by the way, they're also involved with all kinds of stuff, like they have a binocular telescope in Arizona. You know what it's called? Lucifer. Just a little side note. Now, their whole thing is about controlling education is their key deal, especially in the U.S. So Boston College, Holy Cross, Creighton University, Fordham, Georgetown University, Gonzaga, Loyola Marymount, Loyola University of Chicago, Loyola University of Maryland, Marquette, St. John's, and Xavier. They're all Jesuit schools. They're all pretty good at basketball too, but that's a side note, right? Now, at the end of the day, these guys are pumping into college students their doctrine. And their doctrine, as these Jesuits, is quote unquote not what you think. All right? They're pushing a system. Now watch. There we go. Here are some Jesuit trained people. Just a few. By the way, I could do 3 weeks on names. No joke. Joseph Goebbels, you guys ever heard of him? I mean, he's the head of propaganda for the Hitler regime. Joseph Stalin, he's trained in a Jesuit. Fidel Castro, Bill Clinton, George Tenet, the former CIA director. By the way, go look all your CIA directors and see how many of them are Jesuit-trained people. Now, William Casey, another CIA director who decided to go good, and he died. That seems to happen a lot. Now, here's another one. Timothy Leary, leading proponent of LSD, trained by Jesuits. So the whole LSD phenomenon with the CIA in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Here's your guy. John Kerry, U.S. Senator, trained by Boston College. Will McDonough, former chair of the Federal Reserve and Bank of New York, trained by Jesuits. James Blake, former CEO of Johnson & Johnson. You heard about them lately? All right. How about Pierre Trudeau? That's the father of your guy up there in Canada running the show. He's a Jesuit. Prescott Bush. We ever heard of this guy? This is Grandpa Bush, not Poppy Bush, not 1991 president, and definitely not 2001 president. This is the grandfather. This is George H.W. Bush's dad, who is not a good man at all. We could do a whole series on him. Now, the Royal Society. Here's another secret society. Our origins lie in a 1660 visible college of natural philosophers and physicians. Today, we are the UK's National Science Academy and a fellowship of some 1,600 world most eminent scientists. So these people are all about science, right? Now check this out, what their motto is. The Royal Society motto, and I won't even try the Latin, is taken to mean take nobody's word for it. I would call that question the science. Right? That's their motto. I didn't tell you what I said. And by the way, everything about science is to question it. Question the results, question the procedure, how you got it, question it, and you do it to yourself as a scientist and see if you can reproduce it. And so all of a sudden, for the first time in society, they're saying, don't question science. No, that is science. To not question science is propaganda. Questioning science is the scientific method. Hence why they said this. Now, Skull and Bone Society. This is a Yale organization's goal is to help propagate a one world society with the hope of one of its members becoming the head of that system. Former Presidents Bush, his father Prescott, Bush Sr., and the son President George W. Bush were all noted as members of this organization among other renowned constituents, as well as John Kerry, who is distantly related to Bush, both of whom are distantly related to the Queen. The society engages in secrecy, dark arts, and performs ritualistic acts. You want a good time getting sick? Study that. Because they do some nasty things that you don't even want to know about in their rituals. And these guys are been the presidents and John Kerry. So the other day, I'm looking up the Falcons, and I haven't looked them up in a while, and I'm trying to figure out who this Arthur Smith coach is. Do you guys know who he is? He is the son of the founder of FedEx. The guy who's the founder of the FedEx, Skull and Bone Society guy. Went to school with George W. Bush. Small world, guys. All right? Now, the Bohemian Club, founded in 1872 in the Bohemian Grove, enlists top male leaders for scandalous and depraved sexual activities. Every Republican president since Herbert Hoover has belonged. Of its near 3,000 members and other participants include the Bushes, Richard Nixon, George Shultz, Henry Kissinger, Colin Powell, Merv Griffin, Newt Gingrich, Ronald Reagan, Caspar Weinberger, Dick Cheney, Danny Glover, which I didn't get that one. He didn't fit in with that group, but either way. Some of the most powerful men on earth doing despicable sexual things, nude, semi-nude men worshiping a giant idol of an owl in a deeply occultic ritual, what appears to be an actual human sacrifice of a burning and screaming white man, and they choose who will be allowed to run for the highest office of president and vice president in the USA. That all goes on right now. And by the way, what I'm telling you is not in some secret hidden book. This is out there to learn if you want it. Right? Now, but then again, we keep being told we got a choice. So here's some other secret societies. We won't go into all of them. You got the Club of Rome, the Committee of 300, which controls the financial, insurance, and drug trade, politics, and industrial religion. Philosophers of Fire, the Group of Eight. You ever heard of the G8? There it is. Black Lodge, Aspen Institute, Knights of Malta, World Federation, the Circle of Infinite, the Nine Unknown Men, Lucis Trust, Tavistock Institute. A lot of that stuff we studied when we dealt with transhumanism. World Economic Forum, Opus Deus, Hermetic Group, Golden Dawn, so forth and so on. I won't go through all these. Man, you can study a lot of stuff if you want to get into secret society. But here's another one called the Federal Reserve. You say, wait a minute, that's not a secret society. We know about the Federal Reserve. What do you know about the Federal Reserve? Because they have never, in their history, showed their books. You don't know anything. These are the guys who decide the interest rates in this country. They decide everything financially. Matter of fact, every dollar you have in your pocket is owned by them and rented by this country from them with your tax-paying dollars. They're neither federal nor they are reserve, but yet 95% of the American people believe they're a government agency. And they're not. They're a private entity. They're a private bank that we have no control over. They don't report to Congress. They don't report to the president. They control their own thing, do their own thing, and we pay them to do it. Right? So here you go. This is a ruthless secret society because its actions and plans are known only by a handful of elites, the central, national, and international bankers. It's out to gather more power, fame, and control. Contrary to what most people think, the Federal Reserve System is privately held and a non-government owned, which is in violation of the 16th Amendment. This system was started by the Rockefellers, Rothschilds, Warburgs, pay attention to those names, and several other of the sole purposes of gaining monetary power throughout the world. Since the organization, they have gained so much wealth that they rule the United States as well as other countries through their international dealings. Rothschild's famous words that can be governed any country if given control of the country's economics. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. It has been played through the Federal Reserve System, the owner of America and her people, and the economics, as well as the ideologies and the group's thought. Okay, now, let's lead into this whole thing. Now that we've looked at these secret society guys, let's bounce this into the bankers. Now remember, when the Templars went out, they were the banking system for the secret societies. So we enter into the Rothschilds. And this is where it all takes off. By the way, just here are some of them that are going today. Nathaniel, Benjamin, Guy, Evelyn. I'd be mad at the world too if my mom named me Evelyn, right? And then, Jacob. This is the guy I showed you a few weeks ago. His skull is kind of shaped a little Nephilim-like. So let's talk about the Rothschilds. The Rothschild family is an Ashkenazi Jewish family originating from Frankfurt. Now, Ashkenazi Jew is a whole can of worms I could open up right now. And I can't say it because if I do, they'll shut me down. But you know that thing that they're doing to people? And it's having some side effects? This doctor, multiple doctors have came out and found out that the way that thing works and that spike protein works off the H2 pathway in a human. And you guys will all admit that not all human beings medically are the same. Sometimes we're different by race, i.e. sickle cell anemia in black people. Okay? So therefore, how some people react is different based on their race. Okay? And a lot of it can be generations and generations of that. So they've taken this H2 pathway and studied the effects and who it affects the most. The number one people being affected, but matter of fact, it's a 56%, is white Caucasians from Europe, excluding the Finns. In other words, the rest of them. That's the number one group at around 52 to 56%. Then you drop down just a little bit and you find white Africans, i.e. South Africans. And then you drop down a little bit further than that, down to around 35%, and you find black Africans. Then you drop down way down to about 10%, and you deal with the Asians. But there are two groups on this planet that the thing does not affect their H2 pathways. One is the Amish, which the Amish don't participate in anything. So you have no medical data with them. But number two has zero effect on their H2 pathways is Ashkenazi Jews. Okay, that's just a little side note. I'll probably get kicked off, but it's okay. Now watch. So this is who they are. They're Ashkenazi Jews. Families originating from Frankfurt. They were originally, we got Mayer Rothschild. He is the granddaddy of it all. He was originally Mayer Bauer. His name was not Rothschild. He changed it. Right? And we can get into a whole thing on that. But a court factor to the German Landgraves Hesse and Kassel in the city of Frankfurt, Holy Roman Empire, who established his banking business in the 1760s. Unlike most previous count factors, Rothschild managed to bequeath his wealth and establishment an international banking family through his 5 sons who established businesses, banks, in London, Paris, Frankfurt, Vienna, and Naples. So he starts his banking system, and he does it through the secret societies and connections, and he's going to end up funding the ideology behind these secret societies. And so what he does is builds this mass wealth, takes his 5 sons and sends them out. London, Paris, Naples, Vienna, and Frankfurt, and says, all right, guys, this is our banking system. We're going to control Europe through this banking system. And so that's what he does. Now, he starts his first bank in 1770s in Frankfurt, Germany, and becomes a banking arm of the secret society that needed to be replaced because of the loss of the Templars, along with the goal of getting governments to be indebted to the royal noble families. This is his whole job. Get you indebted. Ends up funding wars and so forth. The War of 1812, I don't have time to go into this, but guys, every stinking war we're ever involved in, they're at it, the core of it. Just a side note, we for years have been told our southern border doesn't matter. But all of a sudden now we're talking about going to war because the border of Russia and Ukraine. No offense, I could care less. I'm not about to sacrifice my son to that goofiness when we won't even protect our own country. Think about that a little bit. It's because there is no money to be made in protection of the country with a wall, but there is money to be made in getting a war started. Guys, I am not down for any war. I'm looking for one last one called Armageddon. Amen. That's the one I want, because then he finally gets what he wants. All right, now, but the War of 1812, the Rothschilds come in with a banking system all the way back under George Washington. They end up getting out. They end up getting their second bank going. And Andrew Jackson says, I don't want you in here. We're doing away with you guys. We're going to print our own money. So what happens? He, because he has influence over Great Britain, starts the war. All right? Every stinking war we know of, they're involved in. Now, let's move on. They fund both sides of every war ever since they got going. And I'm going to show you a big one here. All right? So, matter of fact, here is Mayor's wife. She's a hottie, isn't she? All right? If my sons did not want war, there wouldn't be none. And she's right. All right? Now, at the age of 21, Nathan Meyer, this is one of the sons, the main son from Mayer, Nathan goes off and he leaves Frankfurt for England with a large sum of money given to him by his father, and he sets up a banking house in London. In 1810, Solomon Rothschild goes to Vienna, sets up one. All right, Jacob Mayer goes off into France, and he starts one, and it's called the D. Rothschild. So when you start studying the Rothschild family, sometimes it's just Rothschild, and then sometimes it's D.E. Rothschild. The D.E.'s is the French group. The others is the English. Now, the 5 Rothschild brothers worked to supply gold to both Wellington's army. Now, we're talking about the French Revolution, right? So he's given it to Wellington in Great Britain through Nathan, the English side, and Napoleon's army through Jacob on the France side, and began their policy of funding both sides in wars. The Rothschilds love war because they mass generate, they have tons of money that gets generated with very little risk. You're funding both sides. You're a winner either way. Right? All right. So what happens is, here's your boy Mayer, and he splits it down, and what he ends up doing is getting control of Great Britain's money and France's money. So it's all coming back to the same place. By funding both sides, they are guaranteed by the government and the country thereof the efforts of the population of that country, and it doesn't matter if the country loses the war, because the loans are given on the guarantee that the victor will honor the debt and the vanquished. In other words, doesn't matter. Winner pays it all. Because the loser can't pay it. He's out, right? It's all right. You got to pick up his tab. You can't lose funding a war like that. I would love to have a business that never loses. We lose money all the time. We're a nonprofit organization. We didn't start out that way, but that's how we became. All right, now watch. I'm just kidding. All right, so Wessel, Rothschilds are funding both sides in this war. They use the banks that they have spread across Europe to give the opportunity to set up the unrivaling postal service network of secret routes and fast couriers. So in other words, in order to get their money to go, like today, we transfer money. Back in the day, that's not how that worked. Something had to actually go. Now watch this. Pay attention to this. These posts or these couriers carried was to be opened by these couriers. Their details given to the Rothschilds were always one step ahead. In other words, they had their couriers going here, here, and here, which got the information about the war and got it back to the Rothschilds before anybody else knew about it. When you're hearing of news, it's already old news to them. They already know about it. Before 9/11 happened, they knew about it. You and I just get what they give us. Okay, now check this out. Furthermore, the Rothschild's couriers were the only merchants allowed to pass through the English and French blockades. It was these couriers who also kept Nathan Mayer Rothschild up to date with how the war was going so he could use the intelligence to buy and to sell from this position on the stock exchange in accordance with intelligence. In other words, they knew what was going down that happened. Guys, this is still going on. You ever wonder how somebody like Nancy Pelosi's worth $193 million and spent her whole life as a government worker? How is it, and this, by the way, I'm not picking on Democrats, the Republicans are doing the same thing. How is it that David Perdue, your senator, knew to drop some stock right before the shutdown of the economy from 2020? Because there's insider trading going on with these dudes. They know it's going down. I got a customer who's no longer a customer because he is stinking filthy rich. Bought into a surgical mask company in 2019. Took everything he had, sold it, bought into a mask company. I'm like, help a brother out. I'd have sold everything too. Man, I'd have been sitting on the beach with you, but either way. All right, so what's happening is the Rothschilds during this French Revolution, these guys, his couriers are going back and forth, and they know what's going down before the information can get to the other side, right? So the guys fighting the war, the generals, they're not up to date on everything just yet. But the guys financing it are. Now watch what happens. One of Rothschild's couriers was a man named Rothworth. When the outcome of the Battle of Waterloo was won by the British, Rothworth took off for the Channel and was able to deliver his news to Nathan Mayer Rothschild a full 24 hours before Wellington's own courier. So Wellington, the guy running the British Army, he doesn't know if he's won yet. Rothschild knows the English won before the English knew they won. Now remember, Nathan on the English, Jacob over here on France. They're funding both sides. Their courier let them know England won. Watch this. At the time, the British bonds were called consols, and they were traded on the floor of the stock exchange. So what happens is people bought these war bonds, right? So Nathan Rothschild knows they've won. They're about to have to pay out on the war bonds. Watch this. Nathan Rothschild instructs all his workers on the floor to start selling these bonds. Start selling them off. Make people think we lost. By the way, you ever seen Trading Places? This is the same thing that goes on, where the dukes are trying to corner the OJ market, right? And that's an awesome movie, man. But anyway, all right, so they start selling it off. So people are like, well, the Rothschilds are selling off. They know something. So they start freaking out, going, this piece of paper ain't gonna be worth anything if we lost the war. So they start selling it off for whatever they can get. When they do that, the Rothschilds start buying it up. The news comes out, England won. He doubles up on all the money and become absolutely insanely rich. All right? Now, therefore, the consults plummet. Okay, you basically got that. He ends up 20-1 on his investments. This gave the Rothschild family complete control over the British economy, now the financial center of the world. Listen, the Bank of London, the center of the financial world is London. It is not New York. It's London. If you've ever seen me, there are three, if I've taught you some things, there are three capitals on this planet that the cabal runs the world from. Number one, the religious capital of the world is Rome. The financial capital of the world is London. And the military capital of the world is Washington, D.C. And they use all three of them at their disposal to do whatever they want. Right? Now, the Rothschilds have complete control. Napoleon was defeated. England is set to have up a new bank. All right, Nathan Myers has control. And here's what he says. I care not what puppet is in place upon the throne of England to rule the empire on which the sun never sets. The man who controls British money supply controls British empire, and I control the money supply. In other words, he's saying you can have whoever you want on the throne. I'm running the show. I have the money. Right? Now, however, something didn't go well for the Rothschilds. This was in 1814. They had the Congress of Vienna. And so what they've done, and for sake of time, I'm not going to read all this. I'm going to sum it up for you. Basically, what goes down is they are trying to get all the countries to become a one world government even then. And so many of the countries in there were already in debt to the Rothschilds, so they had to go along with it. Except the czars in Russia. They didn't have a central bank. And the czar was like, take a hike. That ain't happening. So, it infuriated the Rothschilds. So you know what they do? They unleashed the Bolshevik Revolution. You know what that is? That's where the communists took over Russia. And they instituted that whole thing. That's where Stalin comes in. Guys, Trotsky, all this, Karl Marx, they push all that on there and they end up killing off the czar and his family and that whole system. Now, and it was all because I don't want your central bank. You need to pay attention to that, because if I can get there, you're going to find out in 2000 there was only 7 countries on this planet that did not have a Rothschild banking. Iraq, Lebanon, Syria. What's happened to those guys since 2000? That's just a little side note. All right, now, in 1852, Jacob Rothschild in France is said to be worth 600 million francs, all right, which is at the time 150 million francs more than all the other bankers put together. So I'm showing you here, they're running England, they're running France, okay? In 1863, the Rothschild banking house in Naples, Italy, it closes down. So what the Rothschilds do is use one of their own, an American called John D. Rockefeller, to form an oil business called Standard Oil, which eventually takes over all of its competition. By the way, the Rothschilds' descendant is John D. Rockefeller. Hence, why they funded him. And so you think the American Industrial Revolution, and you're like, look at all that America's got. We got John D., we got J.P. Morgan, we got the Vanderbilts, we got the Harrimans, we got it all, right? Carnegie. Every single one of those guys is getting backed financially by the Rothschilds. And what they're famous for doing is getting the person out there in the front, and they just sit back and make money off of them. So you don't really know about them. It's funny when people say dumb things like, yeah, Jeff Bezos, the richest man in the world. Oh, please. Not even close. This family's worth $500 trillion. It's not even close. They have more money than most countries. Now watch this. All right? So now pay attention, because this is where we start to bring it home. I've showed you. They're in control of England. They're in control of France. Guess who they're going to also be in control of? The red, white, and blue. Watch this. All right. Following a brief training period in the Rothschilds' London bank, Jacob Schiff, his descendant, is now out in California. Kind of got a pencil neck. You ever seen him? All right. Now, This Jacob Schiff is a Rothschild born in their house in Frankfurt, arrives in America at the age of 18 with the instructions and the finances necessary to buy into banking houses there. The purpose of this was to carry out the following tasks. Number one, gain control of America's monetary system through the establishment of a central bank. Number two, find desirable men who, for a price, would be willing to serve as a stooge for the Illuminati and promote them into high places in the federal government, Congress, Supreme Court, and all other federal agencies. Number three, create minority groups stripe throughout the nations, particularly targeting whites and black. Jacob Schiff was involved in the NAACP long before they ever had a black person involved in it. Do your study behind that. Isn't that interesting? A Khazarian or a Ashkenazi Jew running the NAACP. Okay? Now, number four, create a movement to destroy religion in the United States with Christianity as the main target. Right? 1875, Jacob Schiff, now he's Solomon Loeb's son-in-law of Kuhn and Loeb's, which is a major banking system, and he's now the son-in-law to the main dude, Solomon Loeb's, and he says, here, run the show. So he's now running one of the biggest banks in America, and he goes on to finance Rockefeller, Harriman, which is a railroad, Andrew Carnegie with the Steel Empire. This is all Rothschild money. Now, Harriman, pay attention to that name, because in the 1930s, there's a bank called Harriman and Brown. Guess who is running that place? Prescott Bush. Guess who he's funding? Adolf Hitler. And you still want to buy into all the goofiness you keep getting taught? I mean, it is so deranged that people won't stop and think they're all connected. Every one of them. My greatest regret, well, I've got a bunch of them, but one of them is I was a big Bush fan. Both of them. Thought they were great, defended them. Now I feel like an idiot. All right. Now, he identifies the other largest bankers in America, and at the time, who are they? J.P. Morgan, who controls Wall Street, the Drexels and the Biddles of Philadelphia, all the other finances, big, little, dance to the music of these three houses. So he's over here at Kuhn and Loeb's, and he realizes there's three big banks bigger than us. So what he does, Schiff then gets European Rothschilds to set up European branches of the J.P. Morgan, Drexel, and Biddles. He says, man, we're going to set these up in Europe for you. And he says, but in exchange of getting you to be able to expand into Europe, Jacob Schiff is going to be the head of all banking in America. And so they agreed to it. Hand over the reins to him. So your boy Jacob is running the show. Rothschild agents begin fermenting a series, now watch this, of pogroms. That's not programs, pogroms. This is where you incite violence against a certain race, i.e. Hitler with the Jews. This is going on in Eastern Europe and with Russia. And they're having these pogroms, and what's happening is millions and millions of people are dying, especially the Jews. So what do the Jews do? They flee. Where do they go? New York, L.A., into America, and flood Chicago and these areas. And so now watch this. The reason these programs were initiated is to create large Jewish base in America when they arrive would be educated to register as Democrat voters. Once again, I don't care what your voting is. Listen to me. I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat. How can someone be Democrat as a Jew when the Democrats don't stand with Israel? Why? You're against Israel? Okay, here's another thought. How can your boy up there, Chuck Schumer, have dual citizenship with Israel and America and serve in our government? How are you going to be loyal to one and the other? All right, no, let's see, second thought. Some 20 years later, this would result in a massive Democratic power base in the United States that would be used to elect the Rothschild frontman, Woodrow Wilson, to the presidency to carry out the bidding of the Rothschilds. He said, what's the big deal with that? Because that Federal Reserve is going to come through him. Watch this. All right? In 1881, President James Garfield, 20th President of the United States, who only lasted 100 days, stated 2 weeks before his assassination, "Whosoever controls the volume of money in our country is an absolute master of all industries," i.e., the Rothschilds owned every part of this country, every part of it. Oil, railroad, steel, they owned it all. And he knew that. And so he calls them out. So you know what they did? Took him out. Now, 1886, the French Rothschilds, they obtained substantial amounts of oil fields in the Caspian Black Sea Petroleum Company, which quickly becomes the second largest oil producer. In 1887, an opium trafficker in China, Edward Albert Sassoon, marries Caroline Rothschild, the granddaughter of Jacob Meyer. All right? So now they're involved in the oil over there and opium over here. In 1886, no, we already read that. In 1887, the Rothschilds finance the amalgamation of the Kimberley diamond mines in South Africa. They subsequently become the biggest shareholders of the company, De Beers, and the mining precious stones in Africa and India. They got their hand literally in everything. All right? In 1891, the British labor leader makes the following statement on the subject of the Rothschilds. Here's what he says. "This blood-sucking crew has been the cause of untold mischief and misery in Europe during the present century and has piled up prodigious wealth, chiefly through the fomenting wars between states which should not have to quarrel." In other words, why are they fighting? All right. "Whenever there is a trouble in Europe, wherever there's war, rumors of war circulating, and men's minds are distraught with fear and change and calamity, you may be sure that the hook-nosed Rothschilds is this game somewhere near the region of the disturbance." In other words, they're involved. When a war starts, they're involved. I can assure you. All right. Comments like this worried the Rothschilds towards the end of the 1800s, so they purchased Reuters news agency so that they could have some of the control of the media. So they got their hand in all this stuff making money, but now we got to start controlling how people get information because they're calling us out. By the way, Reuters is still going on today. Matter of fact, I bet at times you're reading stuff on the internet from them. All right, in 1906, the Rothschilds claimed that due to the growing instability in the region and the increasing competition from the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds' descendants through a female bloodline, own Standard Oil. This is why they sell the Caspian and Black Sea Petroleum Company to the Royal Dutch and Shell. This is another example of the Rothschilds trying to hide their true wealth. In 1907, the Rothschilds' Jacob Schiff, there he is again, head of the Kuhn, Loeb and Company, in a speech to New York Chamber of Commerce warns this: "Unless we have a central bank with adequate control of credit resources in this country, is going to undergo the most severe and far-reaching money panic in history." So he's freaking people out. You know, the greatest way to get people to do something? Fear. It's the greatest motivator. For all the people that are doing the thing, why? You're going to die. You have a 99.8% survival rate with the current situation out here if you believe the numbers they give you. But how do we motivate? How do we get people to wear that thing across here when every scientist in the world would tell you it wouldn't stop a virus? Fear. Get people to freak out. By the way, churches have figured this out. How many false conversions do we have for people saying a prayer because we yell at them about hell? Listen, don't come to Christ because of fear of hell. Come to Christ because he is the greatest thing that's ever happened to you. Amen. That's what Christ is all about. Now, where am I at? All right. Suddenly, America finds, so what happens is Rothschilds appear, all right, and he's concerned. We're going to have problems, right? Suddenly, America finds itself in the middle of another typical run-of-the-mill Rothschild-engineered financial crisis, which ruins, as usual, ruins the lives of millions of innocent people throughout America and makes billions for the Rothschilds. There we are. In 2012, December issue of Truth magazine, George Conroy states banker Schiff, Mr. Schiff is the head of a great private banking house of Kuhn Loeb and Company, which represents the Rothschilds' interest on the side of the Atlantic. He has been described as a financial strategist and has been for years a financial minister of the great impersonal power known as Standard Oil. He has hand in glove with Harriman's and the Golds and the Rockefellers and all the railroad enterprises, and has become the dominant power in the railroad and financial power of America. 1913, on March the 4th, Woodrow Wilson is elected, right? So they come to him, said, hey, while you were a college professor, you'd hooked up with a woman, wasn't your wife. Yeah, we're going to need 40 grand to make that go away. I don't have 40 grand. Oh, you don't? Okay, we're going to help you out, and we're going to pay that 40 grand, but we're going to need a favor from you. It's like The Godfather. You ever watch The Godfather? It's called blackmail. This is the way it's still going on today. What do you think Epstein Island's all about? Right? And so what happens is they get him, and he's like, okay, we'll pay it, but we're going to need one of our guys, one of our lawyers, to become a Supreme Court justice. And what happens? He becomes one. So they got this boy in their back pocket, Woodrow Wilson, right? They've got him blackmailed. So what's he going to do? Jacob Schiff sets up the Anti-Defamation League, ADL, which is basically a league that basically says if you call anything out about the Jews, you're considered anti-Semitic. You can't do that. It's illegal. All right? Strangely enough, the same year they do this, they also set up the last and current central bank in America, the Federal Reserve. Congress Charles Lindbergh states the following passage of the Federal Reserve Act, December 23rd, 1913. Do you know why they did it on September 23rd? Most of Congress had went home. They also did it on December 23rd because that is Dagobert's birthday. It's also involved in winter solstice and Saturnalia. These people are obsessed with rituals. And they vote this thing in. And by the way, the Titanic happened in 1912. I don't want to take you down that rabbit hole tonight, but do you ever wonder why that thing went down? There were some people called the Astors on it that died. Matter of fact, out of all the major players on the planet that were opposed to the Federal Reserve, there was two of them that were against it. Everybody else was for it. You know where those two were at? Titanic. Went down. Guess what? You don't have anybody against it anymore. Right? It probably hit an iceberg, though. Now, and by the way, I'm not saying it didn't. It's just funny how every time we have these major events, there's just some little, well, that don't make sense. Right? Now, isn't it important to note, it is important to note the Federal Reserve is a private company, is neither federal nor is it a reserve. It is conservatively estimated profits of $150 billion per year, and the Federal Reserve has never once in its history published its accounts. All right, 1914 starts World War II. German Rothschild loans money to the Germans, the British loan to the British, the French Rothschilds to the French. And so here's what goes down. Germans are starting to win the whole thing. And at the time before it goes down, when it first is happening, America is behind the Germans. They're not involved, but they're backing the Germans. So they pump out the Rothschilds, who are now controlling all kinds of agencies, are using this wolf media company to talk to the Germans and get them fired up, along with Reuters. And England is using Havas and in France and so forth. And so they're using these news outlets. And so what happens is they need to get America involved, right? And so what happens is they start pumping into America propaganda that Germans are where is it? Right here. German soldiers were killing Red Cross nurses. German soldiers were cutting off babies' hands, etc., and manipulating the American public against the Germans. And none of it was true. But it turned the American people against the Germans. By the way, it was done to you and I with Kuwait. You were lied to about Kuwait and about babies being thrown on floors and stuff like that. But that's a whole nother side story. All right? U.S. Congressman comes around and basically says that J.P. Morgan is a Rothschild front, has taken control of American media. Do you know that every media outlet today TV, radio, newspaper, magazine, computer, news outlets, all of them owned by 6 people. 6 different companies own every media outlet out there. So what happens is you have people go rogue like Joe Rogan. And so he just starts putting out his podcast, right? And so they deem it misinformation. The tech people have to do something about it. And so morons like Neil Young, hey, and by the way, was I the only one that thought Neil Young was already dead? They said something about him today. I was like, he's still alive? And it was basically either take Joe Rogan off or take my music off. Well, he's no longer online. Now, so what happens is, I'm trying to skip ahead. All right. So in 21, they start the CFR, the Council on Foreign Relations, which set up by John D. Rockefeller and all that. They set up, they said if CFR says we got to set up control of the media. All right. So in 1940s, man, I'm trying to, sum up all this. So here's what goes down. Hitler's in control of Germany, right? Hitler's dad, come to find out, is a descendant of the Rothschilds, because Hitler's dad's mother was a cleaning lady for Baron Rothschild. She ends up pregnant, and they're like, we got to get her out of here. And this can be substantiated in multiple books. And interesting, that guy rose to the top and funded by the Rothschilds. All right. Now, in 1942, Prescott Bush, father of future American President George W. Walker, and you know the Bushes, all right? He has his company, Brown and Harriman, seized. Why? For trading with the enemy. Why? Because he's funding Adolf Hitler. Why? American soldiers are going to D-Day. By the way, this is the guy whose son and grandson is going to eventually be the head of this place, i.e., the same time 9/11. Right? So he's funding Hitler. You know who else is funding him? Rockefellers. They're providing Standard Oil's giving Hitler his fuel. Henry Ford is helping him. You ought to be ashamed of you guys with that blue oval on your car out there. All right. Listen, I'm just speaking truth here, man. All right. Now, 1945, the end of the Second World War. It is reported IG Fabian plants were specifically not targeted in the bombing raids of Germany. Interestingly, at the end of the war, they were found to have only sustained 15% damage. The tribunals held at the end of the Second World War investigated Nazi war crimes, censored any material recording Western assistance. So you know when you have the tribunals at Hamburg, is it Hamburg? Nuremberg, okay. All the stuff about the guys in the West that were helping had to be censored. You couldn't tell anybody about it. The Rothschilds take a giant step towards their goal of world domination by changing the League of Nations into what we know as the United Nations today. All right, 1963, and I'm literally almost done. Watch this. In 1963, on June 4th, President John F. Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States, signs Executive Order 11110, which returned the U.S. government to the power to issue currency without going through the Rothschilds at federally owned Federal Reserve. He's going to start printing his own money. By the way, Abraham Lincoln did this during the Civil War. You know what they did to him? They shot him. So Kennedy comes along and says, we're not paying these guys anymore. We're going to print our own money, and it's going to be interest-free, and our people are going to get to use it. They shot and killed him. On the stinking plane from Dallas, while his dead carcass is in that building, or in that plane, when they're going from Dallas to Washington, Lyndon Johnson signs the paperwork with a new executive order annulling Kennedy's. Really? The guy just got shot. Wonder why that was so important. It had to be done right then. All right? So, in 1985, the Mullins published Who Owns the Networks, and a federal reveals that the Rothschilds had control of all 3 U.S. networks, which are NBC, CBS, ABC. And somebody listening to me will think, oh, that's all right. I listen to Fox. Find out who Rupert Murdoch's mother is, and you'll find out he's a Rothschild. Right? Now, watch this. In the year 2000, here are the 7 countries that don't have a Rothschild banking system. Afghanistan, Iraq, Sudan, Libya, Cuba, North Korea, Iran. The buildings get dropped, right? So we go into Iraq. Huh? Have you ever just stopped to think, why did we attack Saddam? He don't have the right banking system. Oh, they do now. All right? Afghanistan. We went in there for 15 to 20 years and spent trillions of dollars and just left $86 billion of stuff over there for them because they didn't have the right banking system, but they do now. Libya, Omar Gaddafi, he was funding his own country. You saw what they did to him. They drug him down the street. Right? Now, Cuba, North Korea. You ever notice that as soon as we got done with East Crew, we went straight to North Korea, and we were about to kick that one off until Trump comes in and calms the waters? Now watch this. Here in 2003, this was what was left. In 2011, these are the only 3 countries left without the central banking system of the Rothschilds. Watch them fall. All right, we're way over time. So, all right, next week we'll get into actual Bible stuff. All right, God bless you. We'll see you.